Hello, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. So Warren Gatland has named his first Wales squad since he took over or came back to the nation following the sacking of Wayne Pivac. Some interesting selections in there and certainly a few interesting bits from just reading some of the articles and some of the quotes that came out of his press conference yesterday. Some interesting things to talk about in this video. The Six Nations, though, of course, really not far away now. What is it, 17 days or something until it all gets underway. So I'm going to be trying to produce a lot of content during that time. Do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Drop a like on the video and also comment down below. What do you make of this squad by Warren Gatland, his first since replacing Wayne Pivac? All right, let's get into it. So as usual with Warren Gatland, there's a couple of curveballs in there and uncapped players, 4 of them in total, which I will get onto. But for me, actually, probably the most interesting thing about this Warren Gatland squad is what he said about the older players. And I saw quite a lot of Wales in the most recent autumn where they lost to Australia in that final game. They lost to Georgia. They had a really poor set of results. And part of the issue for me was looking at the Wales squad, as I think Wayne Pivac had struggled to move on from some of the senior experienced players in that squad and bring through new players. And I think he'd struggled to get the balance between those two things, which is something that Warren Gatland has actually spoken about. He's referenced it quite a bit looking at the press conference yesterday. He was asked if he felt in this squad that he's named whether he would move more of those senior players on. But you've still got the likes of Lee Halfpenny, Alan Wynne-Jones, Ken Owens, who I'll get onto in a minute because he's the captain, Justin Tipuric. I think in total there's 13 players over 30 in that squad. And when asked about it, Warren Gatland essentially said that it was too late to kind of clear the decks and bring the young players through. Going into this Six Nations and then, of course, going into the World Cup at the end of the year, they need that experience in some capacity. They're going to need those guys to help the young players come through. And so with this squad, and I also think with looking at, this Warren Gatland tenure of how he gets that balance between needing those experienced players that he's relied upon before and also getting experience for some of the younger guys coming through, I think it's going to be a really fascinating thing to keep an eye on and how he manages that balance. But let's start with Ken Owens then. He is the captain. Obviously, Dan Biggar was the captain for quite a while under Wayne Pivac. He was then injured in the autumn and Justin Tipuric took up the captain's armband. Warren Gatland has gone for Ken Owens, who again is one of those guys past 35 in the squad, one of the older players. But I think he's essentially said that if you look at it in Wales at the moment and the options available to him at hooker, Ken Owens, with his form, been playing really well for the Scarlets, he's the number one guy. He's an experienced guy, he's playing well, and therefore, from that point of view, him being captain makes an awful lot of sense. And he considered bringing through one of the younger players. They've certainly had conversations about who could be a captain post-World Cup, but I think the concern at this moment in time was if you do name one of those players, a Jack Morgan, for example, who's been really impressive in that back row, are they the absolute nailed-on starter at this moment in time? And you might want them as a captain, you might want them to be the person that leads the nation forward over the next couple of years or however long it may be, but at this moment in time, can you guarantee they'll be starting? And I get the impression that Warren Gatland wasn't sure about any of those candidates, so therefore Ken Owens is his choice. I think it makes sense. I think he's been an unbelievable player, Ken Owens. I mean, his resume speaks for itself in terms of Wales appearances, Six Nations, British and Irish Lions tours. So I like it as a selection. The Sheriff captaining his country. Let's see how that goes. I mentioned as well before 4 uncapped players in the squad. You got second rows in Rhys Davies and Teddy Williams, and then centres Kieran Williams and Mason Grady. Teddy Williams in particular seems like an interesting one. Only started 1 game of regional rugby this season, but he's 6'6", he's 19 stone, and I just wonder whether Warren Gatland's looking at that forward pack and wants a bit more bulk in it. Particularly the Georgia game. I was commentating on the Georgia game, and when the Wales replacements came on, their scrum got utterly decimated towards the end of that game, and that was a major reason, possibly the pivotal reason in why Georgia were able to turn the tide and eventually win that match. And so I just wonder whether that's a key element for Warren Gatland. He's also spoken about the likes of Will Rowlands, who's missing the Six Nations because he's injured, and I think Corey Hill as well, who plays overseas in Japan. Will Rowlands will be playing overseas in Japan come next season. There's conversations in Wales about changing the 60 cap rule. Both those guys under 60 caps wouldn't be able to be selected as things stand at the moment. I think Warren Gatland wants to change that because he wants the best players available. And as much as I like Adam Beard and Will Rowlands as the second row pairing for Wales, I just wonder whether Warren Gatland is looking at things and wanting a bit more muscle in that pack. Whether that's the second row or not, I'm honestly not too sure. But I think that's going to be something that they have to correct pretty quickly, because otherwise they will lose out in the collision, they will lose out in the set piece. And regardless of what Warren Gatland can bring, Wales aren't going to improve in the way that people will want to. The front row is also a really big part of that. Kind of skimming through the squad, there's not obvious candidates that are immediately going to change things in the front row. And this actually is where I need, particularly fans of the URC and the Welsh regions, to comment down below, because I don't admittedly see as much of them as I do, say, the English clubs. I just watch more of the Premiership. Rhys Carre, he comes back in. Is he going to bolster that front row enough? I'm not sure, but I do look at the front row of Wales and I think it has been a massive weakness recently. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below if you think there are any other guys in there, particularly front row, who are going to come in and maybe make the difference there for Wales. Back row as well, I think is going to be really, really interesting. Interestingly, Warren Gatland's brought back Jonathan Thomas, who many of you may remember, former Wales player. He's coached at Bristol and most recently at Worcester as a contact area coach. This is something that Wayne Pivac didn't replace when he came in, which I think tells you that this Wales squad are going to go at the breakdown again. I think of the best Warren Gatland teams, and I think particularly them doing a job on England. And a lot of the time, that was the likes of Warburton and Tipperick, Faletau to a degree as well, a number of other guys dominating them at the breakdown. And I think that's going to be a bigger emphasis for this Wales team going forward. In terms of the balance of that back row, I think that's really fascinating as well. I think Jack Morgan's been really, really impressive. Justin Tipperick received quite a bit of criticism when he was the captain in the autumn. You've got Aaron Wainwright coming back in, who was kind of jettisoned by Pivac, but we know how much Warren Gatland likes him after he gave him his debut, so he might come back in. So that's certainly one to keep an eye on for sure. And just those other guys I mentioned, the centres, Kieran Williams and Mason Grady. I have seen it mentioned whether Mason Grady could be the kind of more Jamie Roberts type player, which Wales have moved away from playing a little bit that way. I actually think Nick Tompkins has been really, really good for Wales, but I just wonder whether Warren Gatland is going to want someone who fits that kind of big one-up runner, ball carrier centre that Jamie Roberts, hitting unbelievable lines, kind of brought to his team and to that Wales team that was so successful. I think maybe that's harsh on Nick Tompkins, but again, I think that's something to probably keep an eye on. That's kind of everything in terms of my original observations. Just to run through a few other bullet points in terms of other players that are returning to the setup. Rhys Webb, that's quite an interesting one. Fell out of favour with Pivac. Older, experienced scrum half. Rhys Patrell, Liam Brown, I mentioned Aaron Wainwright and Owen Williams as well. And probably mainly the two main omissions, Ross Moriarty and Nicky Smith in there as well. So as I say, do drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this Wales team. I think there's interesting selections in there. I would be concerned about whether there's enough firepower to arrest the issues that they have had, particularly being dominated in the front row. And as I said in my previous video a couple of months ago when Warren Gatland did return, you don't go back. I just feel you don't go back. I'm not sure whether Warren Gatland is going to have the same impact as he has done previously. I may be completely wrong in that. Wales are going to end up doing the job on England at the Principality in this Six Nations, and I'll hold my hands up and say I was wrong, but I do have concerns there. I think there's interesting selections in this squad. Is it going to be enough? Do Wales currently have the quality of player? And maybe, which Gatland has spoken about, changing the eligibility rules is going to be quite key in terms of them being able to select their best players going forward. All right, drop a comment on the video, like the video as well, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Always really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next one.